I train pretty hard. Most days I walk out of here feeling like I gave it everything I had. And then I went looking into the strongest people who ever lived. And yeah, turns out everything I had is their warm-up. So let's get into it. We measure strength in numbers now. Pounds on a bar. Plates on a sled. A world record posted online and beaten a year later. But every single man on this list took those numbers somewhere they were never supposed to go. Some of them backed up their lifts in front of thousands of people. Some of them did things so far beyond the rest of us that, to this day, people argue about whether it could really have happened. And the last one did something that didn't just break a record. It became a legend that has been told for over 1,000 years. Let's start with a giant. Number 7. Angus MacAskill. In the 1800s, on Cape Breton Island in Canada, there lived a man who was, by verified records, the largest true giant in recorded history. Not a man with a medical condition that made him grow uncontrollably, but a perfectly proportioned human being who simply stood 7 feet 9 inches tall and weighed around 500 pounds. His hands were said to be a foot wide, and the strength that came with that frame became the stuff of local legend. He was said to be able to lift a ship's anchor weighing over a literal ton, hoisting it to chest height. He could carry barrels weighing hundreds of pounds under each arm like they were luggage. There's a story that he once set a full-grown horse over a fence after its owner bet he couldn't move it. Whether every tale is exact or not, the documented basics are staggering enough. A gentle, quiet man the size of a doorway, with the raw power to match it. Number 6. Eugen Sandow. If MacAskill was raw size, Eugen Sandow was control. Born in Prussia in 1867, Sandow is often called the father of modern bodybuilding, the man who turned the human body itself into a spectacle. But do not mistake him for just a poser flexing on a stage. The physique was real, and so was the strength underneath it. Sandow built his fame by challenging the famous strongmen of his era and beating them at their own feats. He would perform a backflip while holding heavy dumbbells. He once supported a platform on his chest, holding 3 horses and several people. He had such precise control over his muscles that audiences paid simply to watch him move them one at a time. He proved that strength wasn't just about being a huge, untrained mountain of a man. It could be sculpted, trained, perfected. Modern fitness, in a very real way, starts with him. Number 5. Hermann Görner. This is where the feats start to sound impossible. Hermann Görner was a German strongman in the early 20th century, and his specialty was grip, the strength of the human hand. And what he could do with his hands has never really been matched. Görner performed a one-handed deadlift of 727 pounds with one hand. He could deadlift over 500 pounds using just 2 fingers. He once carried a half-ton of railroad track. He lifted a table full of weights with his teeth. Even now, more than 100 years later, modern strongmen with all our science and nutrition look at Görner's grip records and quietly admit that some of them are still standing. Number 4. The Great Gama. In 1878 in the Punjab, a boy was born who would go on to become the most dominant combat athlete in human history. His name was Ghulam Muhammad, but the world would come to know him as the Great Gama. And his record is not a typo. Across a career that lasted more than 50 years and thousands of matches, Gama was never once defeated. His training was as legendary as his fights. Every single day, Gama is said to have performed thousands of squats and thousands of push-ups, while wearing a heavy iron ring around his body for resistance. In 1902, he lifted a stone weighing around 1,200 kilograms, roughly 2,600 pounds, and carried it. That stone still exists in a museum today. When he traveled to take on the champions of Europe, the greatest wrestlers in the world either lost to him or refused to step onto the mat with him at all. He was, by record, simply unbeatable. Number 3. Paul Anderson. Now we come to the men whose lifts strained the limits of what people were willing to believe. Paul Anderson was an American, an Olympic gold medalist in weightlifting in 1956. A man the Soviets reportedly nicknamed the wonder of nature when he outlifted their best. But it's a feat he performed back home that put his name in the record books forever. Using his back, lying across a table-like frame and pushing upward, Anderson is credited with raising a platform loaded to around 6,270 pounds. For a long time, that was listed as the greatest weight ever lifted by a human being. People debated the exact figure for decades. But strip away the argument, and you are still left with a man who lifted several tons off the ground with his own spine. Number 2. Louis Cyr. If you ask strength historians to name the single strongest man who ever lived, based on what was actually witnessed and recorded, an enormous number of them give you the same answer. Louis Cyr. A French-Canadian strongman born in 1863, Cyr didn't deal in tricks. He dealt in feats so absurd that he performed them in front of huge crowds, specifically so no one could call him a liar. He once lifted a platform on his back carrying 18 large men, well over 4,000 pounds. He pushed a fully loaded freight car up an incline. He lifted 500 pounds off the ground with a single finger. And in his most famous feat, he stood with a horse harnessed to each arm, 4 draft horses in total, grooms whipping them to pull in opposite directions, and Louis Cyr held them. The horses could not tear his arms apart. By the standard of strength you can actually prove, he may genuinely be the strongest human who has ever lived. Number 1. Ali ibn Abi Talib and the Gate of Khaybar. And now we leave the world of record books and witnessed feats, and we enter the realm of legend, of a story told and retold for more than 1400 years. According to Islamic tradition, Ali ibn Abi Talib, the cousin and son-in-law of the Prophet, and one of the most revered figures in all of Islam, was a warrior of almost unimaginable strength and courage. The most famous account comes from the Battle of Khaybar. The Muslims were laying siege to a powerful fortress, and its enormous main gate stood between them and victory. A gate so massive that tradition holds, it normally took a large group of men just to move it. And it is said that Ali, in the thick of the battle, took hold of that gate, tore it from its hinges, and lifted it, using the door of the fortress itself as a shield in his hand. When the fighting was over, the accounts say it took many men together to lift the same gate he had wielded alone. Now this is a story carried by faith and tradition, not a feat measured on a scale. And that is exactly why it sits at number 1. Because the men before him pushed the limits of what the human body can provably do. But Ali's strength did something even rarer. It became immortal. 14 centuries later, his name still stands for courage and power for well over 1 billion people. The strongman broke records. He became legend, and legend, it turns out, is the one kind of strength that never fades. So what do all of these people actually have in common? Not their size, not their century, not even their definition of strength. What they share is that every one of them looked at the limit of what a human being was supposed to be capable of, and decided that the limit was a suggestion. Most of us will never lift a fraction of what these men lifted. But maybe that was never really the point. The point is that the ceiling is almost always higher than we think it is. These people just spent their lives proving it. Thanks for watching. So no, I'm never pulling 4 horses apart, but that was never the point. These people proved the ceiling is way higher than any of us think. Anyway, back to my warm-up weights. Subscribe if you want the next one. See ya.